and welcome to the SFL podcast presented by 8 p.m. Music here on SoundCloud. Believe it or not, yeah, you may be wondering why there's no graphics. Well, we're sticking with an audio product for the time being because reasons. I'm the host of the SFL podcast, Jack Brown, as always, joined alongside me here by Ramos Lynn, owner of the Mexico City Aztecs, champions, and a new guy in town, or I guess not new to the SFL podcast. Since Mighty RX has dropped off the podcast, we have Ryan Michaels, GM of the Houston Hyenas. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be doing this, hoping I can live up to Mighty's expectation.
Yes, well, he did do the critical play analysis. Did that come out yesterday or earlier today? I can't remember at this point.
I believe it came out early yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome article that y'all should read out there. So here we have a lot of stuff going on in week 3. We got a lot of teams that have really lived up, have blown away expectations. Some teams have let us down, and some teams, well, they've just done what they always do. The games for this week that we should really be looking into here. We got Chicago, Vancouver on Friday night. So I guess tonight when this gets put out. Then we have um, Las Vegas versus Dallas at Dallas. That'll definitely be a proving situation for the Fury. We have Houston taking on Atlanta at the Hive. Hive taking back-to-back home games. Then we have Carolina flying all the way over to London, looking to keep up their winning attitude over at Queensway. Then we have Tallahassee taking on the Tulsa Desperados over in Tulsa. Tulsa definitely looking to improve from where they started. Then we have Oklahoma City, another team absolutely going gun blazing out of the gate, taking on New Orleans, who had a bit of a lackluster start to their franchise last week. Then we got Indianapolis and St. Louis playing at Budweiser, and that both teams there are really riding high off wins after absolutely crushing defeats. Then we have San Francisco taking on the Denver Nightwings. That's definitely going to be an interesting game, considering a new appearance on San Francisco's roster. The primetime game, we have Sioux Falls taking on Alaska, the only undefeated versus undefeated match this week. And finally, on Monday night, we have a battle of some good old-fashioned old-school SFL action of the Queen City Corsairs taking on the Baltimore Vultures. So you know what, guys? What game has really been standing out to y'all so far?
For me, I'm actually really looking forward to the Indianapolis game against the St. Louis Gladiators. Tom Pepper, he has just been efficient with the ball through the first two weeks of the season, and St. Louis has been just ball hawking like crazy. These guys have 11 interceptions for the first two games. Tom Pepper's only gotten one interception taken away from him, and I believe he's only been sacked once, maybe twice through the first 2 weeks. So it's going to be a really interesting match to keep an eye on.
Never mind. Also, but concerning Tom Pepper, he had to go up against Tallahassee's D line in week 1, which that's infamously difficult to get past. Obviously, last week it was a rather easy game going up against the Baltimore Vultures, who Indy, although the score may look slightly respectable, absolutely trounced all over the Baltimore Vultures. The Gladiators, again, they're also coming off a win here, but here's something I kind of want to discuss, and I think Mike Daggs brought it up in the Mexico City locker room. Whenever a team goes on a bye, you can't progress that entire week. And so that could actually put a team a week behind what everyone else was at. And so New Orleans was going to that game, without any progression done whatsoever. So I think really they're at a pretty decent disadvantage to the St. Louis Gladiators. You guys kind of agree with that right there?
Ramos, you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I will kind of agree with that. It also doesn't help much when you're an expansion team and basically you want as much help as you can get. So getting an early bye week can be a positive thing, can be a negative thing. The negative thing is that you cannot progress for 1 week. The positive thing though is that now you have only one game that the opposing team can scout you, but now you have 2 games of the opposing team that you can scout for. And I think that New Orleans will have a pretty good game here in week 3. To answer your question, yes, might be a little bit of a downside, the fact that they were not able to progress, but at the same thing, I don't think it's going to affect them that much, looking at the bigger scheme here this season.
Yeah, and also another thing that has to be realized is that last week Xander Gold just did not have a good game. I think he went 1 touchdown to 4 interceptions last week, which even by SFL standards, which we kind of infamous around here that quarterbacks throw a lot of picks, but even by our standards, that was not a very pretty game to look at for Xander Gold. I think everyone could agree on that right there. But actually, let's hop over to that uh, New Orleans versus Oklahoma City affair. Oklahoma City, they've been absolutely coming out guns a blazing. Sure, they've taken on 2 teams that have gone 0-2, but those 2 teams, obviously, we've watched those games. Those were some pretty intense contests coming in here. And as Ramos said, they only have 1 game to study over New Orleans for. And who knows that New Orleans only showed like a quarter of their playbook, half their playbook. And so many things could be overprepared for or underprepared for by Oklahoma City. What do you guys have to say about just not only this game, but like just the start that Oklahoma City's been on?
Yeah, I mean, Deacon Nickens has just been commanding his offense since he's had 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's just been in command. Tiberius Vovine is just seeming like the angelus wonder. Oh my gosh, ageless wonder over there. He's played forever. I mean, his diving touchdown into the end zone, it was like he was carried by angels themselves.
Yeah, I actually thought that should have been the play of the week since on SFL Blitz released yesterday. That was only number 2, I think, behind Oscar Dunkley's interception, which
Yeah,
I,
Achilles Frank's one-handed interception. I mean, it was a close call between the two of them. I don't know how Cam would have actually decided the two, but I'm happy with the two of them were number 1 and 2 respectively.
yeah, and just in general, OKC's definitely had a very commanding presence. Looking over at however, they do not actually. Deacon Nickens does not lead in terms of passing yards. That goes to Shabazz Synergy of the Dallas Lobos. Shabazz, when he plays in the SFL, and mind you, the season off except for that last game of the season, he's been pretty good overall. I mean, you take a player like him on a team that essentially is just all passing all the time. Remember week 1, they didn't even run a single running play. It was like back Minneapolis Maulers season 4. And so, that was a very interesting thing to see. And of course, now uh, Dallas, they're coming in 0-2, but I'm not too worried about them in particular. They're playing this week. This week they face off against the Fury. And okay, so actually, let's look at this game real quick between the Lobos and the Las Vegas Fury. Uh, the main thing that I look at this is as a test for what the Fury really are. Because in a league like this, one of the things I love when it's like an under 30 game league is that game 3 is always extremely important to see like what a team really is. Las Vegas in week 1 absolutely annihilated the San Francisco Sharks 41-7. Then they turn around and get and then they just turn around and they just kind of put up a lackluster performance against the Sioux Falls Sparrows, which, man, that must have been so satisfying for the Sioux Falls front office to completely shut down Robert Redford. I'm sure he still leads the league in rushing. He didn't get a lot in that last game. The Sioux Falls Sparrows. So Las Vegas is now being put to the test. What do you guys think is going to happen with this team? Are they going to pass the test or are they going to fail?
Well, I actually think so. This week in general is very, very hard to predict. You have a team in Dallas that they are 0-2. They showed a lot of promise in their first game. Obviously, they lost, but it was only by 4 points against the very dangerous Oklahoma City Renegade offense, and they were able to score 33 points on that game. Then they went against the Houston Hyenas, obviously a very good team, and they lost 28-13. So far, this is a very hard week to predict. Las Vegas, we've seen 2 games out of them. The first game, as you say, Jack, it was a game where they completely destroyed the opposition, 41-7. They were running all over them. The special teams were on point, but by the Sioux Falls Sparrows, 31-14. So I mean, this could go either way. I see either a tie game, I see a blowout by Dallas, or I see a blowout by Las Vegas. I think it's one of those games where it's like the team that can score first and probably force a 3-and-out could probably dominate for the rest of the game. And we also might see a game that by halftime might be like 3-0. So it's very hard to say exactly. By experience, I will go with Dallas because obviously they have more years in the league. They're 0-2. They're kind of desperate, and they're at home. So if you make me choose, I might go with Dallas as a prediction. But again, I will not surprise with either score, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny how you said it could be a tie game. Tie games are impossible here in the SFL, Ramos. You should know this. You've been here since season 3. Meanwhile, I'm trying to remember here. Meanwhile, Ryan and I have been here to combine, I think, 5 seasons between the two of us.
I came in on the season 9 championship, so last season was my rookie season. So you probably got more time than me.
Yeah, I do. I came like midway through season 9.
By a few weeks.
Yeah. And here's an interesting statistic to point out here, at least on the Fury side. The Fury are the 6th best pass defense in the league behind the Skyhawks, the Pharaohs, the Sharks, the Red Devils, and the Nightwings. And as we all know, Dallas is nothing but passing, essentially, at this point. They have a copper running back, so you can't really use him that much. So you essentially just go with the air no matter what. But let's transition now over to that game between the number 1 and number 3 passing defenses in the league. The San Francisco Sharks taking on the Denver Nightwings. Now, the Nightwings are 1-1, but just have apparently not been able to score. They've scored 21 points total in these 2 games so far, while the Sharks, they're 0-2, and they got blown out by Las Vegas week 1. I don't think anybody got surprised by that. Then they lost just off a last-second field goal to the Carolina Skyhawks in week 2. So this is a very interesting game to look at. I think it's going to be another very low-scoring defensive, slogfest like weeks 1 and 2 were for Denver. And so, I mean, what do you guys think about this? I mean, Ryan, so you're obviously not in the West, but how do you look at this from kind of an outsider's perspective on the conference?
As an outsider's perspective, I'm actually excited to see how the San Francisco Sharks offense looks like with their new quarterback. They did drop Ahmed Chima earlier on Thursday, and they signed a free agent undrafted rookie by the name of Rob Roby, and I'm excited to see how he's going to actually command this offense, see if he can help them put up some more points. I mean, on the offense, they've only put up 182 yards of passing a game. Their running back has been able to help them out quite a bit with over 100 yards a game, but they really got to find a way to be converting on those third downs. They've only been converting on 47%. They've had 2 turnovers so far, which is decent through the first 2 games. But even if you're taking care of the ball, you still got to score those points, or it's not going to really matter.
Yeah, and as these first 2 weeks showed, especially that second half against Las Vegas, because sure, it was a blowout, but mind you, Las Vegas only scored 3 points in the entire second half, which for me at the convention that was probably the most boring thing to watch ever with all the gang from Las Vegas there, aka just John Bond and Levon Irvine. So yeah, that all is a very interesting game to watch right there. Sure, from surface value, it's probably the game with the least amount of storylines. But just looking at the defensive stats and the offensive stats, and one last note about the Nightwings before we go there, Jeremy Vega, the owner of the Nightwings, he was the former offensive coordinator for the Vancouver Legion. And so it's rather ironic to see that his offense now is one of the worst in the league that just teams that can't score. They're the team with the lowest points a game average at 10.5, considering the fact that they have won a game. The other two, Vancouver and Baltimore, are still winless. And
Yeah, and
now
if you look at that too, that also credits to their defense. I mean, they do score 10.5 points per game, but their defense does also hold the opponents to 11 points per game. So I mean, their turnover differential is -2, but I mean, they only allow 250 yards a game, so their defense is up there top notch. And if that offense can't come around, that defense is going to keep them in games, game in and game out.
yeah, but again, you need to score points to win. You can't win off a 0-0 tie. That's just not
Yeah.
how things work. that's that's what everything boils down to right there. And so now let's actually hop over to the Eastern Conference, where we have two teams in the East that have been rather surprising in terms of their efforts this season in the first 2 weeks. Carolina, first time in their franchise history at 2-0, taking on the London Knights, who are 1-1. Now, obviously, the Knights had an absolutely atrocious game in the air last week from Nathan Lee, and Carolina again, they're flying high. And I want to make a note here: they've had what I would consider as probably one of the weakest schedules in those first two games. They played Baltimore week one, and Baltimore has just not been off to a hot start in these first 2 weeks, and they beat them 24-13 off those 3 touchdowns in a row. And so next up, let's actually hop over to the East for a matchup between the Carolina Skyhawks and the London Knights. So Carolina's definitely impressed the SFL world so far, starting out 2-0 on the season for the first time in franchise history. And I think that even includes, all their incarnations in their past. But mind you, here's the thing. Uh, Carolina, I would say, has probably had one of the weakest starts in the league. They played the first game against the Baltimore Vultures, who I would just argue are now right the worst team in the league. And then you also have the San Francisco Sharks they played and won off of a field goal the last second. Sure, they played them well, and San Francisco is a much improved team from week one, but just those are not very strong teams to make me convinced that Carolina is a playoff contender. I mean, Ramos, we played them twice last season. How do you view them now, kind of looking from cross conference?
Well, the one thing that I've been impressed with Carolina, you mentioned the schedule that they have had, and that's something that is kind of true. However, what's really been impressed, I've been really sorry, what I've been impressed off of Carolina is the fact that they have been able to close the games, because last season they had like 4, 5, 6 games. I don't know how many games where they lost at the last second, whether it was with a long touchdown, allowing a game-winning field goal, getting intercepted at the end. They lost in so many heartbreaking ways. It was painful to watch. But this season, they were able to close the deal against Baltimore. You mentioned Baltimore not having a very strong start, which is true. But at the same time, there was a very strong win. And last week against San Francisco, how the quarterback was able to lead, commanding that offense to a game-winning drive. He had to make a clutch conversion. It was like a 3rd and 10, had to make a clutch conversion. It was actually featured on SFL Blitz for a first down. That led to the game-winning field goal. So that's what I've been impressed off of Carolina, the fact that they have been able to be in clutch, something that they were unable to do last season. I mean, if they are able to close those games, they're a playoff team last season. So the fact that now they're able to close these games is important. London is struggling with pass protection. If Carolina can put pressure on the QB, if Carolina can keep being clutch, I like their chances of going 3-0. It's not going to be easy because they're going to be on the road. It's a long, long, long trip to London, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Skyhawks. Great run game, and I like the defense overall.
Yeah, and if we're gonna talk great run games and great defenses, let's shift over now to the Southern Conference where we have the Tallahassee Pride heading on the road, taking on the Tulsa Desperados, two teams that were probably amongst the premier teams of last season. Obviously, Tallahassee went 14-1. That one loss coming probably the worst place it could have. And Tulsa, they made it to the playoffs and had a very strong, I think, 8-0 start last season. But for Tulsa, this season's start has been the complete opposite. Currently sitting at 0-2. While Tallahassee, sure they're 2-0, but it's a very different Tallahassee, dare I say. Ryan, you're in the Southern Conference. How do you look at these two teams going up against each other in this sort of format?
Being part of the Southern Conference, I mean, you really pay attention to these kind of games. Like you said, last season, Tulsa had an amazing start. I believe you were right when you said they were 8-0, and then they finally got their first loss. Tallahassee 14-1 last season. That one loss just coming and in the very last game of the season at the championship. This season has seen Tallahassee looking like they're relying more on J.A. Aniola. I'm hoping I got that name right. He'll probably correct me later.
Corrects everyone.
But yeah, so they've been looking like they're relying on him a little bit more often in these first two games. He's had 44 rushes. He's got 2 yards short of 300 and 298, averaging 6.8. I mean, this last game he helped seal the deal right at the end of the game, and for Tulsa, I think that defense is going to start turning up, and it's got to start creating some more turnovers so they can get some more opportunities on offense. And then it's basically the only way you can beat Tallahassee half the time is keep that offense on the field.
Yeah, if you tire a defense out, it doesn't matter how many star D tackles. You could have 7 star D tackles all gold, run nothing but goal line blitzes, but if they're tired, that's not going to be as effective. And so, once again, we're going to shift over to the Southern Conference, to the team that, kept the Atlanta choking label alive, the Atlanta Swarm, taking on the Houston Hyenas home at the Hive. The Atlanta Swarm coming off the absolutely devastating loss to Tallahassee last week with 2 pick sixes and letting in a rushing touchdown right at the end to lose 31-17. Ramos, you were calling that game. How is it like during those 3 drives? And of course, how do you look at this game?
Well, I was able to call this game with Curtis. It was such an interesting and very intense game where we knew that the team that made the bigger mistake was going to lose that game. And Atlanta made a few mistakes. Obviously, they had 2 pick sixes against them. And they got very lucky in a couple of fumbles as well that they were able to recover. Otherwise, the game could have been pretty ugly. As far as Houston, they had a couple of games where obviously the first game they didn't look good, but obviously this was against probably the best team in the league right now in Queen City, and then obviously they played against the Dallas Lobos, which I like how Kentez Johnson looked. I think he looked very poised. I think he looked like a quarterback who is not afraid to get hit whilst he's throwing the football, which is a very important attribute to have as a rookie QB. Having that presence, like that pocket presence of I'm going to take the hit and I'm still going to deliver a good ball. This game is in Atlanta, though. This is a very tough place to play. They just got, beat by the Tallahassee Pride. But, again, even though it could have been worse because of the mistakes they made, at the same time, they were leading this game, that game 17-10 until Tallahassee went on the run. So I think it's going to be a grinder. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair, this one. And probably it's going to be decided by 3 or 4 points. If I have to choose a team, I have to choose who's going to win. Probably I will go with Atlanta just because they got beaten at home last week and they're kind of, angry about it. So I'll go to something around 20-16 approximately.
Okay, and so with that, we blasted through the non-primetime games. So now let's head over to the primetime schedule. First off, we got Friday Night Lights of Week 3. We have the Chicago Wildcats traveling up to Canada to take on the Vancouver Legion in a matchup that probably many say Season 9 championship should have been. Hashtag Stevens was in bounds. And you have two teams right now that are currently in their combined records 0-3. But again, that does not mean these are inherently bad teams. Vancouver has had signs of life. We saw that first drive that ended with that glorious touchdown pass against the Alaska Storm's defense, which is known for being extremely rigid in their playing. So, Ryan, this is, cross-conference play right here, but how do you view this whole thing shaking out?
I think one of the keys for Vancouver is getting that high-value running back in Cody Hill more involved. They only average 77 yards a game, and although I do like those long, deep passes like the one to Killian, but you paid your running back a good value, and you got to make sure you use them. As for the Wildcats, they've historically had a really good defense, and right now it's just an unfortunate circumstance of being 0-1 after a bye week. I believe they're coming into this week off of their bye week, so it brings back in our conversation the game planning that we can do and the progression that you can do in your bye week. And unfortunately, we'll have to see how much it actually affects this game of Chicago versus Vancouver.
Yeah, it'll be a large impact. Ryan, who do you think is going to come out on top, though, out of this whole
in my opinion, I'm thinking Vancouver gets Cody more involved, and I see them coming out on top. I don't see it being a high-scoring affair. It's probably somewhere around 14-10.
So Vancouver keeping up their low-scoring game. And, of course, I forgot to mention there, that is essentially the Carolina Bowl, as we all know, both Shan Varner and Andy Hamilton both were a part of the same coaching tree over at the Carolina Skyhawks before they both got expansion teams in Season 9. Second to last game here, we have a battle of some old men in the SFL. We have the Queen City Corsairs taking on the Baltimore Vultures down in Baltimore, Maryland. Queen City having a very strong start. Not that surprising, last week, Oscar Dunkley had an absolutely fantastic performance. 5 tackles, 4 interceptions. How much better you get right there? Meanwhile, Baltimore has just kind of been sputtering back into the league. Even last week with the acquisition of T-Pat as their new head coach. Last week was not very good, but I think now will probably be the time that that new playbook starts working its gears into the Baltimore Vultures. And it will be a very interesting game. Ramos, do you agree with me on that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, actually, you were asking earlier about, which of the games of the entire schedule intrigues us the most. For me, it's this one. The reason why is because you can argue that Queen City right now is the best team in the league. And Baltimore right now probably is having the worst start in the league. So this could be potentially, if you want to look at it this way, the best and the worst teams in the league, if you want to, say it that way. However, the thing is this. These two teams go back all the way to Season 3. Actually, the first Baltimore game ever was against Queen City when they were called the New York Knights. And every time Baltimore and Queen City is just a slugfest. It is high scoring all the time, something like 34, like 30, 38-35, kind of those type of scores. So even though these two teams are in just completely different starts, one team is skyrocketing, the other team is trying to find their grip again. Obviously, Tim Johnston, the owner of Baltimore, trying to find his groove again, has T-Pat as his coordinator. T-Pat has been out of the league for a few seasons, so already, he's getting back in shape. Even though I think this could be a very close game. The game is in Baltimore, so I'm still going to give the edge to Queen City. I just think that Queen City right now has too strong of a offense, like especially the run game, and just has an incredible secondary. So I will still give the slight edge to Queen City, but it will not surprise me if this is like a one scoring of like one score. You know, a lot of people might predict like, man, Queen City is going to blow him out by 28 points. I don't think it's going to be that much. Maybe about 6 or 7 points.
At most 10. I think we can all agree on that one right there. And finally, save the best for last, folks. The Sioux Falls Sparrows travel up into the frigid cold of Alaska, although it's not that much colder compared to South Dakota. Granted, I don't live in South Dakota. I know how cold it is. To take on the defending champs, the Alaska Storm, in the eye. Alaska having as strong of a start as ever. Sioux Falls looking to start the vengeance quest. The last time these two teams met up was in the SFL semifinals last season, where the Alaska Storm beat them 20-20. I'm going to ask for both of y'all's inputs here. So start off with Ryan. How are you looking at this game?
I'm definitely looking at this like it could be a revenge factor. I mean, Sioux Falls was eliminated by Alaska in the last offseason or playoffs, and they lost Robert Redford, but they found a really good acquisition in their rookie running back Colin Hart, and he's been lighting a fire under a lot of the league. He ended up in second of the league in rushing after 2 weeks. Alaska, once again, went with a non-contract running back, and they brought in, however, a fullback at a contract that is hoping to pave the way for him some more. It still looks like they like to air it out a little more than other teams, and I mean, Mighty's found a formula and it's coming for him. That's working real well. I can see this one actually ended up being a nice little slugfest. More likely a defensive one, just because I can see the Sioux Falls defense keeping Ron Cochran in check for the most part. As for the Alaska defense, last season they actually had what I feel is an underrated defense, and it definitely showed when it came to the championship game against Tallahassee, and they were able to shut down that offense and let their offense go to work. I think I'm going to have Alaska winning this one. Probably somewhere around 17-14 on a field goal pretty late in the game.
All right. So, Ramos, do you agree with what old Ryan Boy here had to say about this game, or do you think it's going to go completely opposite? It's going to be like a blowout for Sioux Falls?
No, I don't think it's going to be a blowout by Sioux Falls or a blowout by Alaska. You know, Queen City Baltimore is the game that intrigues me the most, but I think we can all agree this is by far the best game of the week. Sioux Falls and Alaska, two heavyweights. We all know the story. Looking at these two teams, I love Alaska. I love what they're doing. Fullback looks great. The wide receivers look great. Ron Cochran looks great. The defense looks great. However, I do like Sioux Falls. Right now, week 3, I like the Sioux Falls Sparrows a little bit more. I think they're a stronger team. I don't know. I just like their build more. I just like their explosiveness more. How in one simple play they can change the whole complexion of the ball game. So even though this is in Alaska, which is really tough, a really tough place to play, I will go give the edge to the Sioux Falls Sparrows. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, though. I think it's going to be a game where even though these two defenses can really come into play, they have both demonstrated this season. You know, Sioux Falls scoring more than 30 points in a couple games. Alaska, they scored 38 against us. They scored a good amount of points. I think it was 28 against Vancouver, if I remember correctly. 27, sorry, against Vancouver. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Both teams over 27 points. I will go with Sioux Falls, 30-27.
Alrighty, so we have two very different predictions about this game. Well, they agree on the fact it's going to be close, but again, different winner, different sort of game we're going to be seeing. So we're going to be seeing who's right on Sunday night. And with that, thanks for tuning in to the SFL podcast, presented to you exclusively by APM Music. I'm your host, as always, Jack Brown, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this week's SFL podcast.